right, hello and welcome to Teaching Interpretive Reading for Novice Level Learners. My name is Frances Lazette and I am excited to share this information with you today. This session will discuss interpretive reading strategies and activities designed to help develop the skills novice language learners will use as their foundation for interpreting authentic texts. And it will also include example activities that can be used in person or in an online setting. A little bit about me. I have taught all levels of French, kindergarten through 12th grade. I have also taught 7th and 8th grade English language arts, which is where I learned a lot of the strategies I'll discuss today. Additionally, I have taught in a variety of settings, where in schools where French is taken by choice as an elective, or where French was the only elective in that school, or in the building I'm at now, all students are required to take a language class. And right now I am teaching exploratory and level 1 French, so getting them right at the beginning of their language acquisition careers. And the reason I wanted to tell you that was because having worked in several different positions has helped me realize the importance of actually teaching interpretive reading skills instead of just hoping that students come in with them or are actively using them on their own. So I know what you're thinking already, but I'm not an English teacher. I've never been taught how to teach kids to read. But the main thing is that if you're going to ask the kids to read in your class, you're going to have to be a reading instructor on some levels. But don't worry, it's definitely not as awful as it sounds. You simply just need to stop and think about the strategies you use every day as a reader, and then point that out to your students. And be more mindful of what you are expecting the students to do and helping them get there. And here's a list of a few key things that you should remember. The big one that took me a minute was assuming no prior knowledge, because kids are constantly reviewing and revisiting the same skills that they've been using for years. I learned this when teaching 7th and 8th grade English language arts, that I thought kids would already be making inferences and kids would be using, pre-reading skills, and it just turns out they had to review it pretty much every single year. Again, if you have a variety of students, you're going to have them coming in with varying reading levels and skill sets. And even if you think they should be actively using certain strategies, it's definitely best to explicitly teach them. And then for your sanity and student sanity, just pick one thing to focus on at a time. So the first thing I'll be talking about is how to introduce interpretive reading strategies to your students, right? Letting them know what they're doing and how they should be doing it. So at the very beginning of each year, I explicitly teach interpretive reading strategies. I will introduce what the students will be expected to do. I introduce specific strategies for my students to use. We take guided notes, we model these activities and strategies as a class, and then I use common language throughout the year. The more they hear it, the more likely they are to retain it, and so it just makes everything a lot easier. And then this is the list of strategies that I offer to my students. Some of them seem very basic, but they're all very helpful, and you'd be surprised what kids don't necessarily do on their own. So the first one is looking at the pictures, then looking at the title or the headings or the bold words, using cognates or unit vocabulary depending on how far you are in the term, using charts, graphs, and numbers. They always get excited because charts and graphs look exactly the same no matter what language. Looking for clues in the questions or clues in the answers. That goes back to good test-taking skills that they should be using in other content areas, but maybe not necessarily. A big thing that's hard, especially at the novice level, getting them to try not translating every single word. Don't try to go word by word through a document, because that takes up so much time and isn't necessary. I always tell my students also, if you see a word and you don't know what it means, just skip it and hope it's not important, right? Sometimes you'll be lucky and you won't see that word anymore. And then sometimes you'll see a word, you'll skip it, and then if it keeps repeating itself, you'll realize that maybe it is important and you can infer meaning from a different part of the text. Making inferences is huge, using what you do know to answer questions about what you don't know. And then finally, I employ a lot of the talking to the text strategies, very helpful for students. And then this actual list that I have created, the students will have that list. They'll have it in their notes. I will actually project them on the board before we do any interpretive reading strategy. We discuss and review. Sometimes I'll have the students focus on a specific strategy, and then sometimes I'll just leave it up to them, depending on how independent they are at that point. And then the more they see this same vocabulary, the easier it is for them to learn. Okay, so now that you've taught your students the strategies they can be using, here are some strategies for you to help you start incorporating good questions and practices. So the main thing you want to do is make sure you offer students the time to revisit the strategies that you've been teaching them, and then also make sure that your activities are set up to encourage good interpretive reading habits. So interpretive reading instruction. One thing to remember is that reading occurs in 3 parts. The stuff you do before the reading to kind of establish an idea of what you'll be learning about. The strategies you employ during reading, like as you're reading a text or an infographic or an article. And then the stuff you do after you read to kind of make sure you understood what you were going through. So it's important as a teacher to create activities that acknowledge all 3 parts of the process. And for sure, when I was designing activities when I first started teaching, it was definitely a lot easier to focus on the after reading questions. And then what I realized is that doesn't show us the entire process. So one before reading strategy I use is called previewing the text. And this one's huge. So before you read something, you should preview it. This helps your brain know what you are going to read about and helps you identify key components of the reading. As you probably are aware, students don't do this, right? Students tend to they don't read the directions, they don't read unit overviews, they tend to just start reading the text and hope that everything comes together by the time they get to the end. And so essentially, I always talk to the kids too about that. When you've read a whole chapter or you've read a section of something, you get to the end and you realize you have no idea what you just read. You read all of the words, but you didn't really piece anything together in your brain. And so what is important is make previewing the text part of your activity. You have to model it as a class, and you want to be sure that you write questions that require students to preview the text. And what I mean is, here's an example of an activity that I do with my exploratory class, and then especially at the beginning of the term too with my level 1s, is question 1 is always, what pictures do you see? Write down at least 2. And then the second question is identify cognates. Find at least 3 cognates in the text. And I always remind them what cognates are, especially at the beginning, so I don't have to answer that same question a million times, even though we've talked about it a million times, they'll still ask. But these first 2 questions here require the students to look around, see what the information they can get from the text before they start answering questions. It gives them an idea. It helps them frame the infographic. Same thing here. This was a handout that I had given them, a little article, and I asked them, before you begin reading, preview the text. Look at the title, pictures, bold words. Ask them to make a prediction about what they think the article will discuss, right? And then again, going back to cognates, find 5 cognates and write down what you think they are in English. So they're very simple questions, but it forces the kids to go through and figure out what's going on before they go into reading. And then another one too, if you just want them to get used to previewing the text, like skimming for information and stuff, I'll always do a little gallery walk at the beginning of the year, and I'll just post 5, 10 infographics around the room about random stuff, and I'll ask the students, what is this infographic about? And give me 2 reasons why you think that, what helped you make your guess. And this has the students essentially looking at the pictures, looking at the words, and trying to construct meaning, even though it's about nonsense, essentially, to them at that point. Okay. And then another thing you could do, depends on how ELA heavy you are, you can have the students identify what type of text they're looking at. Is it expository? Is it a narrative? Is it persuasive? Is it from a newspaper? Is it an infographic? Is it a website? Ask them this question and then tell me How do you know that? So having the students make their guess and then give you reasons to support their decision. And then during reading. So this is important that students are actually reading stuff and processing it at the time versus just reading the words and not really connecting stuff together. So talking to the text is a huge strategy that I use, and essentially has the kids take notes as they read. So they can write their notes down in the margins. The notes should be short, simple phrases. They should not translate word for word. Another thing they can do is write questions along the side of the passage is pretty helpful. They can underline keywords and phrases. They can circle unfamiliar words that seem important. Or you can have them, and the big thing too is if they have to translate something, like if they need to look at their notes to see what a word means, or they have to ask me to come over and tell them what something is, have them write the translation down. So that way, the next time they come across that word, they can just go back and reference it earlier in the activity. And so this strategy makes sure that the kids are actively reading, not just reading the words without comprehending what they are reading. So another during the reading activity they could use is using clues in the questions and the answer choices. And the big thing is showing them how to find a clue in the question or in the answer and have them look for that in the reading. So an example here is, based on the age range provided, are you a millennial? And every time, without fail, kids are asking, what's a millennial? I don't know what a millennial is. And I was like, listen, if I haven't taught you the word, that means it must be a cognate, right? So you look around the text, find a word that looks like millennial. It's over here. And then after, it's got this range right here, 18 to 30. And they're like, well, no, I'm not. So that's how you find your answer. Another example, based on the principal advantages list, which app is best for job recruitment, right? So principal advantages list, they have to look around for something that looks like that. And then they have to find something that looks like job recruitment right here. And that's Indeed or LinkedIn. There we go. Right. So simple stuff, just teaching the kids to use cognates, use good skills, find it in the text, looking around it, and then making your answer. Okay. And then one last one, making an inference, using what you do know to make smart guesses about what you don't know. So this one says 76% of people. So I always tell my students numbers are the best because you just look for that in the text. So 76 is over here. It says au restaurant, and you look at it. None of these have restaurant as a choice, but you have don't eat lunch, go out to eat, and then bring a lunch. So then students are able to infer it's go out to eat. So very simple. Another thing that's helpful is having the students justify responses as they're reading through, going through. So the questions, you have them and you have the students have to explain why they came to the answer that they did. And so they go back and you can have them write it down. You could have them circle it in the text. You can have them highlight things in the text. Things like that will have the students actively going back to find where the answer is and then explaining why they think that is the correct answer. And then after reading skills. So strategies to use for after reading is make sure you're very intentional the first few times you're trying a new skill. You want to make sure that you model stuff. So discussing the answers and how you found that answer. Project the activity on the board. Try to visually show the students what you were doing. It'll seem kind of awful at first. It's definitely a lot of extra work for you at the beginning, but the more the students see it and have a visual explanation of what they should be doing, the less you'll have to do in the end. Group work is another one that's great too. Having the students work together to answer the questions, then they can maybe explain things to each other through a different way than I have. And then that helps them get another perspective on how to do the activity. Another thing that I also love is surprise group paper. And this is where, because my kids are always sitting in groups anyhow, but I'll have everyone working alone. And then towards the end of class, I'm going to pretend like all the groups are just submitting one paper that I'm going to check and that represents their group's work. And so what they have to do is they have to discuss their answers and explain how they came to that conclusion. So that way everyone has the same answers on their paper and it's not just them copying it from, one kid in the group, that they all have to agree with it. And then finally, think, pair, share. This is where students work on a task alone. And then you have them partner up with a partner to compare responses and talk about things that they were confused about. And then finally, they'll share out with the entire class as we correct the activity together. And then just again, make sure you name the specific strategies that you are using. Maybe if you're asking them to preview the text or use cognates or make inferences, make sure you specifically reference them as you're discussing the answer, so that way the kids get used to hearing the terminology. And then another thing that has been super helpful is talk to your peers. Go to other content areas and try to use similar activities or templates as the other teachers in your building. Okay, if you try to teach using similar strategies as other content areas, the kids will become familiar with it, and then it's kind of less work for you too, right? It makes it a lot easier. That's where my talk to the text came from. That was a big one in our English language arts department. And so I just used the same template, the same things they were using in their rooms, and the kids were already familiar with it. So it's a huge time saver too. And then after reading. So make sure you reinforce skills from other classes in your class. So create questions that require interpretive reading skills, like what was the main idea? Doing character analysis activities, identifying a claim in the article, and then underline a sentence that supports it. Making true or false questions where they have to correct the questions that are false. Doing the plot diagram, always a good one from ELA. And then making connections to the text, either connecting the text to your own life experiences, connecting the text to something else that you've read, seen, or learned about before, or just connecting the text to something you know that is going on in the world. So that is how you introduce interpretive reading skills to your students, and that's how you make sure your activities that you create include an emphasis or include questions that require the students to use interpretive reading. And then here's a couple different ideas that you can use to help keep some sort of variety in the output you're having students do, right? If you have them keep doing the same things over and over, they tend to get bored, and all of these activities you can use to get the same answers without it seeming so monotonous. So one thing I do a lot is gallery walks, right? Where you post informations or questions around the room and students have to answer questions. Either they have questions on a handout or they have a generic task that they're repeating throughout the entire activity. And then students just wander the room and they can answer the questions alone. They can answer questions with a partner. You, depending on what you're looking for, you can have the students write their responses or you can have them say their responses too. So you can use that one for speaking or writing is great. Another one you could do is putting sentences in order. So use sentences from a story you've created in class. You can create a series of sentences from a video you watched. You could just make up a logical series of events, and then the students take those sentences and put them in the correct order. And you can do this one in a variety of ways. You could have the students write the sentences out in the correct order. You could do a cut and paste activity where they cut everything up and then organize it and glue it down. You could have them put the cut up sentences or index cards in order on their desk, and then the teacher just walks around and checks it. Or you can do it where you have them all typed out and the students just have to write their number, like this one happened first, this one was second, this one was third. So that way, if you don't want to do cut and paste, you can still do the same activity. Another one to do is the story diagram. You can use vocab from a story you've done or a video you've watched or a story you created or even from a movie you watched as a class, right? Maybe make this into an activity. And then you just have the kids put it into the plot diagram. How did it start off? What events led up to the turning point of the story? What was the turning point? Following action, resolution. One thing I have found is helpful is to put the number of activities, right? These will all be one, but the rising action, the kids kind of get confused. And so another thing that's super helpful is to make sure that the students have already covered story diagrams or plot diagrams in their language class. Definitely, I learned that one before where my students, term 1, really struggled with what to do with this. And then my term 2 students had no problem because they had been using it. So it's for sure helpful if they've seen it before. Fill in the blank. Always super simple. Restate something from the story or the movie. The students fill in the blank with the word that works there. And a lot of times too, these ones are good because there may be more than one correct answer that goes there. So that helps the students feel more confident about it. But the big thing is don't type the sentence from the text word for word. Otherwise, students just go back, find that sentence in the text, and then fill in the blank. And that's not really about them understanding what the sentence says. It's just them about being able to find it in the passage. So make sure it's paraphrasing something from the story you read. And then one of my favorites always is having the students draw pictures to represent the sentences. And you can see that was also on the last one I did, where it has a blank and they leave a space there for them to illustrate it here. And then sometimes too, this is where you can get really creative and just write really like bizarre sentences using your unit vocabulary, and the kids have to draw it. And so they at least enjoy the activity as well. And then I enjoy it too, because it's fun to make fun of their drawings. Matching activities are great. Just lots of different ideas here. You can match the character to what they said or did. Match a picture to the text. Match questions to their answers. Descriptions of characters to the character themselves. You can write out a couple sentences to describe an image, and the kids have to figure out which image that describes. Or just give students a description or a text that they have to match up with someone around the class. If you're trying to get a lot of movement, one kid has a picture, one kid has a couple sentences, and they have to go around and find the person. True or false is always an easy one, but a way to step up the complexity is having the students find their answer and then justify it. You can use it for true or false. A lot of times I'll just have the students correct the answer if it's false. So if it says like Easter is in March, and then you look on this infographic and that year Easter was in April, right? So they correct what was wrong about it. Justifying the answers, kind of going back to the one I just did. This helps prevent random guessing. So students have to explain how they found their answer, and lots of different ways you can do this. You could have them say what makes the answer false. You could have them correct the sentence. They could circle the word or in the story that helped them come to their conclusion. They can underline or highlight their answer in the text, or they can explain the inference or the connection they made in English, especially at the novice level. Like if you can have the students explain stuff in English, it's not really a negative thing because they don't have the command of the vocabulary at this point. So just having them show what they did and how is pretty helpful. And then making predictions, super easy. So put a break in the text, put a break in your story, pause your movie that you're watching, and ask the students to make a prediction about what's going on. It's super simple, but it shows that they're engaged and they're thinking about what they're watching. Another thing too is making sure you use a variety of interpretive reading stories. So I like to do social media, use the Instagram posts. You can search by hashtags on Twitter or Instagram. Wikipedia screenshots, monument websites. You can use blogs or celebrity websites. Infographics are fantastic for this level. Little kid books are fun, but sometimes a little strange. News articles, websites for students or kids in the target language. And teachers paid teachers is also great too for finding things that are already made and perhaps related to the content that you're currently discussing. So here's some examples. Again, I always use Wikipedia screenshots for when we're doing our Musique Mercredi, where the students can learn about and answer questions about the artists we're talking about. Instagram is great. You can follow accounts made for language learners, but you can also follow like famous museums or monuments or places in the target language, sports teams, internet memes, commercials. It's all great. And then the kids enjoy actually looking at this more than they do like textbook generated readings. And then, so these strategies here are how to incorporate or move things into an online or a blended setting. So one positive thing about teaching online is that you have access to so many authentic resources. So look for ways to add screenshots or links to target language websites, articles, social medias. Like it kind of forces you to use them, and it's actually great. But 2 pro tips I learned this spring. First, insert your text as an image, right? So screenshot a passage or something, so that way it prevents students from translating the pages, like the internet pages, or from using internet translators. And then another tip is chunking your text into smaller, more manageable pieces. It makes it easier for students to find the information they need, and it also prevents them from feeling overwhelmed and then just stopping. Oops. So one thing that I used pretty much every day was Google Slides. I would use it to introduce my notes and to do activities, but then also I would use it to transform my existing worksheets into activities that my students could do on their own. And then a big thing too is if you're using Google Classroom, super helpful to make a copy for each student so they can edit their own version of the Google Slides. Very, very helpful. And so what I did here was like this worksheet here. Normally the students would read it, do talking to the text along the sides, and then we'd reference this handout later on. I had to make it into a Google Slides presentation for the kids. And then you just chunk it up into smaller pieces and still give them the same prompt, the same opportunity to explain what they read in English, right? And so again, I call this one in the box. You'll talk to the text by writing words or sentences to explain what you read. So they read this little passage and take little notes in this box. And then you could also use Google Slides to do the same activities. These are just different examples of how to, transform your worksheets into something the students can do at home or independently. So they had to identify key components of the story and put it into this box. Same thing here was I had written out sentences from the story, and they had to decide which image corresponded with that part of the story and then drag it over to put it in the correct order. This is Google Forms is also another resource you can use. I insert images with the text that I want the kids to read, so it's a lot easier than them having to navigate between two open tabs at the same time. Just especially at the middle school or 9th grade level, they struggle with that. So you just put a picture of what they're going to read. Students can easily see the text, and there's multiple question formats you could use, such as, short answer. You could do multiple choice. You can do check boxes. They're really great. And a lot of times too, I would use repetitive question styles with my students and then just use sections to split up the Google form. So I would have like one person's picture here, and then they would do 2 questions about it, and they go to the next slide. And you can do the same thing with like a text or a passage like that, using sections to make it seem a little more manageable for the kids. And then Pear Deck was a great thing to use. I've used it in the classroom before, but now you can use this where it's a student-paced setting, and it's a Chrome extension, and you can ask questions directly on the slides that you are using to having the kids go through. And then there's lots of different question style options. So like you could have 3 different choices here, and the students have to answer a question based on which picture is being described. They can do a reading here and do a short answer to explain what they read in the passage. And then another one too, Pear Deck has the drawing option. So again, going back to having the kids draw things just to be silly, but it's a way for them to demonstrate their understanding in like a less threatening way than maybe having to type it all out. And you just give them, a description in the target language, and they use the drawing tools to draw on the slide. And the good thing for the teacher is you can view the responses 2 different ways. You can do it by question, which I always prefer because you kind of go through and check things all at once. And then it's organized by name. These little gray boxes are where their names are. And you just ask them the question, and you can see all of them together. It also identifies non-responders, and also gives you the choice to comment directly on their stuff, from one screen. Same thing with the drawings. You can see all of them in one spot based on the question. And you can also go through student by student as well, if that's your preferred way. But just sometimes it's easier to go through and do, through this format. But you can see who's getting it, who's not. And it's pretty simple to use in the blended format. So essentially, to summarize things real quick, interpretive reading strategies, just make sure you are explicit in your instruction. Break things down step by step. Model strategies for your kids. It's definitely a lot of work up front, but it's worth it in the end because your workload reduces throughout the year. Make sure you are intentional with your activities. Ask questions that require the use of targeted language skills. Repeat strategy language to build familiarity, and then use structure from other content areas. And finally, just offer a variety of different text sources for your students, and then allow them opportunities to demonstrate their understandings using different activities and different output models, and then help students make connections to identify the strengths and the trends in their own learning. All right, well, I hope this session was helpful for you. I hope you're able to take at least 1 or 2 activities back to your classroom, maybe use one of those different apps to make your blended learnings a little bit easier. So thank you.